So this being a Thanksgiving holiday, tomorrow Thanksgiving Day, and so it occurred to me to might be a good topic for a Dhamma talk this evening. So first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to Ajahn skills as a chorister. The masterful training in a brief period has upgraded the Brahmacharloka realm to hitherto unvisited heights of glory. And also I'd like to express my gratitude. So many people responded by descending to the floor. It's very grateful when you're in a position of teaching. The signs that people actually listen to what you say are wonderful. And I actually listen to what I say. That's even better. You know, when you're giving all this good advice, occasionally arises, yeah, I should do that sometime. Yeah, right. So when we're teaching, you should also bear in mind we're teaching ourselves as much as we're teaching you. So gratitude is a powerful and wonderful quality. Actually, what springs to mind first of all is some years ago on Thanksgiving Day in a local paper there was a Gary Larson cartoon, which the scene was a farmyard, and there was a wooden stump and a farmer with a line of turkeys beside him, and a farmer with an axe in his hand. But in fact, the farmer was flattened on the ground, and on top of him was this tree that had fallen over. So he splattered on the floor of the chicken run with the axe in his hand, and the turkeys were actually standing there saying, "We thank you, Lord." So that was what immediately sprang to mind. Funnily enough, when I've mentioned this a few times on previous Thanksgiving retreats, but maybe it's worth bearing and repeating how when I first came here about 10 years or so ago and was staying here in the Bay Area and talking with people about getting used to American customs and American festivals and holidays and different things, and also getting a bit of a sense of the history of this country and a bit more of the detail of what had happened to the native peoples and the flood of the Europeans across the continent in the 19th century. And then getting a bit of the story behind Thanksgiving festival, and I remember saying to some people one day, well, I think it's really great that at least one day in the year, at least one day, the white people in America express their gratitude and remember that if it wasn't for the native peoples helping them, then they would never have made it through that harsh winter. And so at least one day there's an expression of kind of gratitude and respect. And so I'm waxing lyrically along this line, and this sort of puzzled look appears on the face of the person I'm talking to. And this is like a, liberal, lefty, Bay Area type, us lot, Bay Area type being. And so I'm in mid-sentence, and they said, well, no, and they kind of had this sort of hesitant, surprised look on their face. And I said, well, isn't that right? I mean, isn't that what, it's like Thanksgiving? And I said, oh, I'd never actually thought of that. I said, well, isn't that what it's, giving thanks to these, right? They were totally hopeless farmers. They couldn't make it. The local people helped them out, showed them how to hunt and how to find yams and catch the turkeys and grow this and that, and then they survived. And so the next year they had their harvest. They all survived, and then they all did a big feast together, and they thanked them. Oh no! No, they were thanking God. Oh. So that was a big surprise to me. And it was equally revealing that this was a completely competent adult, well-informed American and white person, and had never occurred to them in their entire life that the thanking might have been to the actual other humans who did the guiding and helping. So I like to put that into the mix, just so there is in the flow of the Thanksgiving event, there is a recognition of that the cooperation and friendliness and mutual support that on a basic human level that occurred in those early days, and that we can rejoice in that. And even if that wasn't the motivation for the Thanksgiving feast, I think it jolly well should have been. That's what I think. So gratitude is it's a quiet feature in the Buddha's teaching, but it's a fairly persistent one, and has a strength and many threads throughout the teaching, and in encouraging it as a quality of relationship, one of the basic qualities of relationship that are encouraged. One of the very poignant and beautiful little passages that occurs in the scriptures is shortly after the Buddha's enlightenment, and he's living in the forest on the banks of the Naranjara river near Bodh Gaya in the few weeks after the awakening. And the thought occurs to him, a person lives unhappily who has nothing to look up to. Someone who has no one to look up to, no one to be grateful, nothing to look up to, lives unhappily. Who can I look up to? Who can I express that relationship of gratitude and veneration for? And he thought, well, I myself have no teacher. I've arrived at this state of liberation through my own efforts. So there's no one in the world, no other person in the world that I can look up to. But I can look up to the Dhamma. I can look up to the truth, the Dhamma teaching. I can respect that. I can revere that. I can have gratitude for that. So I will live looking up to, revering, respecting, having gratitude for this wonderful Dhamma. So that always struck me as a very beautiful thing. That phrase, one lives unhappily who has nothing to look up to. Even a fully enlightened Buddha, that's an emotion, a stirring in his heart of just like a basic human appetite, and that so we love to express and to experience that quality of gratitude. It's a delightful feeling, that quality of rejoicing and being glad in. So, in considering this, actually the chant that we finished the the afternoon is the sharing of blessings. This encompasses a lot of the different areas that the Buddha encouraged the quality of us to generate the quality of gratitude towards. I don't want to make a kind of laundry list, but I thought it might be. I'll try to reflect on some of those and talk a little bit about those different areas and the different things that come up. Actually, maybe firstly, just that the cultivation within ourselves of a gratitude towards Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. That the rituals of the morning and evening puja, the bowing, the chanting, the reciting of these verses that we do, these are like an expression, a formalized expression of that quality of expressing gratitude, of being thankful, of looking up to. And the words themselves of the chanting, we do them in English as well as Pali, so that gives us a sense of how it's being phrased. But sometimes, and quite often, for many people, we're not born as Buddhists. We're not most of us were not born into a Buddhist culture. A couple of people here were born in Thailand and have grown up in that kind of sea of devotion and faith, and have that as a sort of an atmosphere for life. So, being born into that and growing up in that. For most of us, we stumbled into contact with Buddhism somewhere along the line, and mostly we entered because of an interest in meditation or a desire to stop suffering or to make sense of this weird conundrum of human life. And so then we don't have a particular, like an immediate sort of heartfelt zing when we think of the word Buddha. I remember one of the people in our community, it wasn't until she actually was inside the stupa in Bodh Gaya that after having been a nun for quite a number of years, the Buddha had always come across. Maybe she thought of the word Buddha, it had this feeling of threat, this power figure, this authority who was watching what she was doing and going, not quite good enough, sister. She was born as a Catholic, so there was a certain intensity of conditioning was there, and that she was unconscious of this. But but it was actually only when she was inside the stupa, the great shrine at Bodh Gaya, the place of the Buddha's enlightenment, and felt this overwhelming strength of beauty and brightness and power. And then she suddenly realized that the previous number of years she sort of held the Buddha in a very, very different place. It had been like this very wise, sort of stern authority figure who was ready to scold her or catch her out if she was being a naughty nun. So oftentimes it takes a lot of years to get some kind of emotional sense for that. Or when we repeat the words, it can be a kind of empty repetition, or that it's an intellectual appreciation. And the Buddha as a person can seem very remote, or the Dhamma teachings and so on. And so that it's always important. You're not trying to force anything or create something which isn't there naturally. So when we are kind of contemplating that, sometimes it's helpful. This came up in one of the conversations today. If we just feel downright alienated by the sort of liturgical language and the revering of the Buddha as a sort of heroic spiritual figure, and it all seems a bit alien and remote or false or too much like the Anglican or Jewish or Catholic conditioning. What can be helpful, or where we can really contact that quality of gratitude, is if we really look at it from what has been the contact point for most of us. Because most of us, at least certainly was for myself, but the real contact point with Buddha Dharma was the meditation and the effect of training the heart and the internal qualities of Buddha Dharma and Sangha, the things that really have a meaning, having an effect. The others, it really took 15 or 20 years. It's like, to hear the word Buddha and think, wow. Yeah, so if you were feeling that you were lagging behind, it can take a long time to really soak in. I don't think I'm alone in our monastic community in finding that. So that one exercise I used to do, and I found this very revealing, because I used to worry about that. When we do the chanting, and I would faithfully follow all the words and do all the right things, but I didn't find any real heart in it, even when we did it into English. And I began to think of particularly the Buddha as the quality of wisdom or awareness itself. Like it is blessedness, awakened oneness. But it's talking, if you take the he out and you put in it instead, and you look at the same verses referring to the wisdom of your own heart, then there's we find like there is an immediate recognition of, this is great stuff. I'm really glad that there's wisdom here. I'm really glad the heart can be awake and know. That's a true immediate experience that we've known through meditation. So we can say, it's wonderful that the heart can be awake, can be free, can be bright. It is awake and holy. There is that possibility. So that we can begin to find that quality of gratitude towards the gratitude that there is the wisdom in our own heart, gratitude for Dhamma, not just in terms of piles and piles of books of teachings, but Dhamma in terms of nature, the way things are, the natural order of things, that a kind of delight in nature. It's like that in us, which is like when we feel that kind of loving relationship to the natural world, to the sound of the frogs croaking, or the rain falling, or just the creaking of our own joints. How beautiful! Nature isn't just frogs and rain. Nature is stiffening joints as well. So then the Buddha also, the teachings encourage gratitude towards our spiritual teachers. So obviously that's the people that we have inspired us, who have been a great spiritual resource, and who have helped us most directly. Gratitude springs forth very easily for most of us in that respect. But also for the teaching that we, I kind of glossed over that quite quickly, but we can feel also and cultivate a sense of gratitude that these wonderful verbal teachings have come down over the centuries. I remember some years ago I was leading a retreat at Amaravati Monastery in England, and it's about halfway through the retreat, and this one fellow who'd been meditating for quite a number of years, and I knew quite well, suddenly during the course of the sitting, there was this heaving sigh, this great moan, and he kind of bent, of course I can notice this, and he bent over double, and he was just keeled forward sobbing for about 5 or 10 minutes, and of course everyone in the room is like, "Is he all right?" But he seemed to be still a sense of kind of okayness there, and then he sat up, and then he was just tears pouring down his face, and every so often you hear this kind of great sigh and this sort of heaving, and I thought, well, he seems okay, just let him flow. come the end of the sitting and people went out to walk, and I leaned over and said, "You okay, Vic?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I said, what was that was coming up? That was pretty powerful, obviously. He said, "Well, I just had this I just suddenly thought of the Heart Sutra, and this overwhelming feeling of gratitude and joy swept over me, just thinking of the teachings in the Heart Sutra, and so that was what was happening." So I've been meanwhile envisaging, oh God, his mother must be dying, or his girls left him, or his kids died, or it's like, no, it was just pure rapture and delight about the form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not separate from emptiness, emptiness is not separate from form. There is no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body or mind, etc., etc. Which one could look at on paper and think, well, that's pretty clinical. But yet there was this wonderful, bright effulgence of emotion that sprang forth in him. Also, one of the things that Ajahn Chah encouraged and I found very helpful is not just cultivating gratitude towards our teachers, but also those who have led us to the path or been responsible for helping us to find the path. When Ajahn Sumedho first was, he lived here in the Bay Area in the early 60s. He was a graduate student in Berkeley, just as it was starting to get very interesting. So he left in 63. He said he knew what was going to happen if he didn't leave. He could see where his life was going. It was all getting very, very exciting, and he was getting very interested in the beatniks turning into the hippies, and all sorts of very fascinating drugs were starting to circulate down the area. So he thought, better get out before I can't get out. So he headed to Thailand with the Peace Corps and ended up ordaining as a novice there up in the remote province of Nong Khai, just across the river from Vientiane, the capital of Laos, far away from the main civilization areas of central Thailand and in a remote rural province. And he lived in retreat for the first year. And he'd been interested in Buddhist meditation for a long time. He'd read a lot of Zen books that were published in the late 50s, Alan Watts and D.T. Suzuki and so on. And he got a lot of inspiration from that. He was very powerfully attracted towards Buddhist meditation. And he'd studied these Charles Luke books, Chan and Zen Training, and he derived, learned various techniques from those teachings. So he lived in this little monastery in Nong Khai in seclusion, just him in a hut. He didn't have to go out on alms round, didn't have any duties, just him in his hut day after day for an entire year. Now you might, before this retreat began, you might have thought, wow, paradise. But as some of you are discovering, even being with your own mind for a day, 5 days, whatever, are we day 5 or day 6? A day can be a long, long time. So here he was in his hut for a year, but he had many wonderful and powerful experiences, and wonderful and terrible all. But he had this insight that he'd wanted to stay on and become a fully ordained monk. But he had this insight that he needed more discipline. That it was fine just sort of being under his own steam, but he needed to learn how to live with a greater sense of discipline. And that was probably one of the reasons why he left Berkeley, because he didn't have a lot of self-control. So he thought that's why one of the reasons why he left. It was getting very, very exciting. So he had this inspiration that he should find a monastery where he could train in the Vinaya discipline a lot better than this meditation monastery where he was, where they focused on meditation, but it wasn't terribly strict in other ways. And at that time, this monk who was a student of Ajahn Chah happened to be visiting attending a family funeral in Nong Khai, and he came to stay at this monastery. It was the only meditation monastery around Nong Khai, and it just so happened that he also spoke some English, which in 1963, 65, 66, was very, very unusual. And he'd been in the Thai Navy and had done time with the American Navy in the Korean War. So he actually spoke some English. So not only was he a forest monk, a meditation monk, but he also could talk with Ajahn Sumedho, and so he told Ajahn Sumedho about Ajahn Chah. Ajahn Sumedho asked his preceptor if he could go down and train with Ajahn Chah, and his preceptor said, fine, great, good idea. So this monk, whose name was Samai, then took Ajahn Sumedho down. They met Ajahn Chah, and they became his very close student, and stayed with him up ever since then in that lineage. And in many ways, the rest is history. Samai was a very strict monk, and kept the discipline very, very tightly, but in some ways he kept it too tightly, and was in a way seemingly very, very rigid, and so that when you hold the discipline too tightly, not in terms of disrespecting the rules, but you get too fanatical and uptight about it, then it's very hard to sustain that for very long. So after 7 or 8 years, he ended up leaving the monastery, and then because he left, he felt a lot of self-criticism, and he was a failure, and he couldn't do anything, and he flunked out, and he became a drunk. He became a serious alcoholic and a hopeless drinker, really a dreadful, kind of depressed, and really couldn't pull himself out of it. And every so often he'd come round to Wat Pah Pong and see Ajahn Chah again, kind of have a good cry, and every time he came to visit, then Ajahn Chah said to Ajahn Sumedho, you should make sure you go and see Samai and spend time with him and express your gratitude to him, because he was the one who brought you here. And every day you should share the merit of your life as a monk with Samai, because it doesn't matter what he does or how much of a mess he makes of his life, he's the one who brought you here. And so you should always remember that, never forget that, and that you should always not feel indebted. It's not really like indebted, but never let yourself forget that, because there's a bond between you, and because of that bond, you'll be able to help him. Because no matter how low he gets, he'll be able to remember there's one good thing that I did. In the midst of that, at least there's one absolutely surefire good thing I did, was I brought Sumedho to Ajahn Chah. And eventually he died. He was drunk in the street and got knocked down by a car in Nong Khai and killed. But Ajahn Sumedho has often talked about that and expressed how powerful that has been to him, and how much it meant to him. And also it was true that when he did meet with Samai, that he really could see that it was helping him. It was a bright light in his otherwise miserable world, and so that in whatever state of being that he might have moved on to, even while he was alive, that was a kind of support and a kind of a blessing in an otherwise very dark and dismal realm. So that's something that we can all do. And sometimes we can be pretty dismissive or unforgiving, or just forget. People kind of way back, but just to remember those little threads, those people, those contacts that cause us to awaken to the spiritual path. And there's 10,000 strange ways that we might have been drawn into this. And say, oh yeah, it was that guy at the gas station. It was that school teacher of mine. Yeah, I couldn't stand it, but she said this one thing that always stuck in my mind. So whoever it might be, that just to bring those into our hearts and to remember them, to really consciously share the blessings of our life with them. One of the most prominent aspects of beings to share our blessings with and to cultivate gratitude towards is parents. And and this is very strong within Buddhist cultures, Buddhist countries, to express and to develop gratitude to your parents for giving birth to you, for raising you, and so forth. Now, oftentimes in the West, as soon as you say gratitude to parents, you can feel the ire rising in the room. You didn't meet my mother. You know. Well, let me tell you about my dad. So that the word parent doesn't always have quite the sort of emotionally positive loading that it might have in some other circumstances. The way that the Buddha talks about it in the scriptures, he said, even if you were to carry your parents around, so you had your mother on one shoulder and your father on the other shoulder, and you carried them around from this day forth until the day they died, taking care of them in all circumstances, looking after them, and even when they lose their faculties, and it gets quite graphic, like even when they lose control of their bowels and their feces are running down over your shoulders, across your neck, it's all there. It's deliberately kind of, ugh. And like, would my mother and father really want to be carried around on my shoulders? I mean, it's really very impractical. But he's sort of, again, the Buddha is very wonderful at creating these very graphic images that, you remember, like, wow, Mom and Dad. So even if we were to physically carry them around, still you couldn't repay the debt of gratitude that you owe them. But then, as in many of his teachings, says that if you did all this stuff for them, things for them, like looking after them, feeding them, bathing them, nursing them, etc., you couldn't repay them. But the one way you can repay them is to teach them the Dhamma. And if they're away from the path of virtue, to help and bring them to living virtuously. So this is how you can repay the debt of gratitude. So, yeah, even though some of us might have very positive relationship to our parents, and that it is something that rises easily forth in the heart, others of us might have very painful, difficult, very conflicted, ambivalent sense of relationship to our parents. And even if that's the case, even if a parent has caused us a lot of harm, or there's a very painful relationship, even that good and benefit can come forth from that, in that that painfulness can itself be the cause for us to develop spiritual qualities and noble qualities. And there was this fella some years ago who wrote a book called The Spiritual Advantages of an Unhappy Childhood, or words to that effect. He was so impressive, Oprah actually ended up at his feet on her TV program, I was told. So that when we're talking about gratitude to parents, not trying to just paint everything rosy, but just seeing the different dimensions of it. And for myself, my mother is a very saintly and totally lovable person, and has always been so kind of humble and generous that she's always drawn good and kind people to her and throughout her life. My father's a bit of a different character, and I had a very painful, tense relationship with him particularly through my teens. Like, both of my parents were the youngest children of old parents, and I'm the youngest child, and they were quite old when they married. So my grandparents were all born in the 1870s, 1880s. Seriously. And I'm not that old. I'm 45. So my parents all grew up in like Victorian, Edwardian households. So their version of the world and my version of the world, born in 1956, coming into my teens in 1967, it was a rather different world. Again, when things were getting very, very interesting. So the clashes between my father and myself were spectacular, and so I developed a lot of resentment, and there was a great deal of tension between us. But as I got older, and 10, 15 years into monastic life, and as he got older and his life, he was less sort of in charge of his own world, and was much more, in a way, humbled by the aging process and the loss, the death of many of his friends and peers, and his own sort of self-assurance softened, and his own kind of fascist tendencies loosened somewhat. He was one of my great delights in life was threatening with marrying a West Indian girl. He's a very racist man. And there's other features as well, but I won't go into that. But what I began to realize when I put myself into his shoes and kind of saw how his life had been and the difficulties he'd had in his childhood, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, he was actually doing the best he could. Wow, what a thought. And it was suddenly all of those sort of the years of resentment and negativity and snide remarks I was dropping left, right, and center. Like suddenly, and I knew that was a completely valid intuition. Like, yeah, that's right. The guy was really doing the best he could with what he knew and what he thought was right. And I found this immense gratitude, and he really was a kind of which end do I hold sort of guy when confronted with the baby. He was really not equipped for domesticity. My mother, she said just after the birth of my eldest sister, even though she was just recovering from the birth, she nearly slugged him, because she said there she is sitting in the hospital bed holding their first child, and his first comment was, do they always look like that? But she's brimming with this abundant love for this being that she just produced into the world. They all look like that. But I began to feel this immense gratitude for my father, which wasn't kind of ignoring his sort of negative qualities, but saying there was a bigger picture there as well. Also to cultivate gratitude towards the people who are our friends, and also to our favorable circumstances. To feel gratitude for what good fortune we have. The karma, our karma has ripened in such a way that we are born into a situation where so we have a reasonable health, or we have good friends. We live in a privileged situation here, like living in North America, some first world life. Most of us from reasonably comfortable, middle class, well-supported existences. For the majority of us, probably that's the case. Some of us might even feel guilty or uncomfortable about being in the privileged class and doing a lot better and living a lot more comfortably than much of the world. So it's important to see that cultivation of gratitude isn't sort of trying to make ourselves feel sort of justifying our own benefits, or trying to make ourselves feel guilty for being a have rather than a have-not, or like feeling like we should give everything away. It's really interesting that picking up the tone and the style of the Buddha's teaching is that he encourages generosity, but for his of the wealthy disciples that he had, lay disciples, he never says to any of them, you should really take, all of your wealth and just get rid of all of it, give it all away, or dump it in the Ganges. He actually encourages people, if you're rich, make use of it. Use it to help other people be happy, experience the joy of giving. Be able to, if you have wealth, then you can provide for your family in a good way. You can have a pleasant living situation. And actually consciously and encouraging people to see that their material wealth and resources are something that can be appreciated. We can feel grateful for that and make good use of it, and use it as a source for creating good karma for ourselves and creating joy and blessedness, good fortune for the people around us. So in cultivating gratitude for our living situation or the good relationships we have. If we have got a pleasant, like a harmonious relationship with our partner, our spouse, or with our cat, our dog. We have a pleasant house or apartment to live in, or we have a good relationship with our siblings and children and so on. These are things to rejoice in and to allow ourselves to be kind of consciously glad of that. Similarly, our health, what good health that we have, and the best way though of relating to this, because it's in the Buddhist language, it's not like we thank you, Lord, for all these blessings, because it's, without the Creator God in place, it kind of doesn't really work. But like more of a selfless appreciation of how we can appreciate, open the heart to acknowledge. Yeah, it is. It's delightful. It's convenient. It's helpful to have these faculties, these friends, this living situation. So the way that we most skillfully handle that is to hold it in the environment of impermanence. Like the chants that we do, I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Now this is not in order to generate depression, but just in case you're starting to feel good, get a load of this. You're going to die. You're going to lose it. It's all leaving. So that's not the point. The point is that we easily generate an undercurrent of fear, anxiety, that it might all leave. Or what will I do if it does go? Or I want to keep it, or it's mine. And there's this unconscious tension of trying to hold it, trying to keep it, and fear that it's going to go. So what these reflections are doing is helping us turn towards it and say, yes, it will go, because it has to. It will change, because it can't not. Everything that comes together must separate. That's nature. So rather than say hoping that it won't change and hoping that we can keep it and fearing that it's going to go, it's like turning directly towards that, doing 180 degrees and going against that current of anxiety, of clinging, of wanting, like taking refuge in the material world or the world of permanent relationships and so forth. Not, it's like reflecting, looking at that tendency to take refuge in that, my things, my friends, my family, my children. So yeah, it's there, and it's delightful and it's good, but it's not a refuge. The true refuge is in wisdom, is in knowing, is in Dhamma, in Sangha. That's the dependable refuge. So that when we hold it in an atmosphere of anicca, then we can really appreciate it, but we're not depending upon it. So you can actually delight in it much more freely, because you're not feeling like you've got to sustain it or you've got to keep it. Like when we reflect upon our health, how wonderful, my eyes still work. Great, when you get up from the sitting cushion, hey, I can still walk. Sort of, kinda. Like our friend Daniel Barnes many years ago introduced me to the acronym TAB, which is the way that Daniel is a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And so we are the TABs, those of us gathered here, the temporarily able-bodied. That's how the Ashlot are referred to by the wheeled beings. The temporarily able-bodied. So, just to be able to appreciate that, and appreciating our privilege, the privilege that we do have. How wonderful that we do have a day of safety, a day of relative lack of discomfort in the body. Amazing. How marvelous. My legs still work. Great. I can see. Hey, great. Like a 8-precept novice in Thailand, this monk was working on this sewing machine, trying to fix this old Singer pedal sewing machine. He had this screwdriver and he was working on trying to get this bird screw out of the plate to take the plate off on the bottom of the sewing machine. And he was working away at it, and of course I'm watching him and getting very involved in the task, and suddenly the screwdriver snapped. And so my thought, as soon as it snapped, was, damn, broke. But as soon as I thought, damn, he said, anicca. And that really struck me. It was like this epiphany I had, the screwdriver epiphany. Isn't that amazing? He saw that it was always impermanent. I thought it was a screwdriver. He saw it was just earth element temporarily in screwdriver form, during the flow of its changes. And now it's not a screwdriver anymore. So when we hold things in that way, then we use them, we delight in them, we're glad to have them, but then as they go, it's not, oh my God, my eyes are going, that face in the mirror, oh dear. First thing, I think you should ban bathroom mirrors. Especially first thing in the morning. Ooh. What? He's only 45? No. This haggard ancient frame staring back at you. No, it's just, that's the way it goes. Bye-bye. Oh my God, it's all leaving. Sagging. Where else is it going to go? So gravity pulls down. So also, as I was saying before about families, and if we have difficult relationships with our parents, also gratitude even for like in the chantal and sharing of blessings, those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile. Sharing the blessings of our life for those who are hostile, sharing, we can experience gratitude towards that which is unfortunate circumstances, the painful things of our life. When we have lost our legs, or our loved one has left us, or has died, or we have had some kind of grand failure or disaster. We have been done wrong, some unrequitable romance or hurt by a parent or by the government, or just like now in the global situation, a situation that you wouldn't choose. Here we are, it's Ramadan, the winter's setting in, still bombing Afghanistan, and the kind of plight and difficulty of the people there in particular at this time, living in terror and uncertainty, and even the most painful, unfortunate circumstances, what we wouldn't choose. If we have the right attitude, it can be a great spiritual advantage, and we can turn it around. And probably all of us have had friends or people that we know or those close to us experiencing great, or even ourselves experiencing great difficulty, things we would never have asked to happen. But then we find a sense of it's crazy, but this is actually the best thing that ever happened to me. I've known several people as they're dying of cancer or AIDS, people either the people themselves or people in their families. A woman whose 16-year-old daughter died of cancer said, it's terrible to say, but this was the most amazing and wonderful gift that she gave to the family. She had this very, very virulent form of cancer. There was a little lump on her thumb that was noticed in September. She was dead by Christmas. And she said, the mother who I knew said it was the most extraordinary. Those 3 months were the most extraordinary months of all of our lives. And even though we're deeply sad to have lost our daughter, what she gave us during that time, what she brought forth, was something that none of us ever would have known or had ever experienced in any other human being. But it summoned forth these incredibly beautiful spiritual resources in the daughter, who was not some kind of avatar. She was a regular 16-year-old English girl who liked horses and boyfriends. But as her life fell away, this incredible wisdom and spiritual beauty emerged. On a slightly different note, one of the stories that is on a more everyday level was one of the monks of our community, Ajahn had many years ago. Ajahn Sumedho gave him the opportunity to go off to Thailand and spend a few months there, traveling and being in retreat. He'd been living with the community in England for a long time. It was like a sort of monastic holiday. Okay, Suji, go off to Thailand, do what you like, no duties, have fun. So, all those years of having been in England, working hard, sort of repairing this old house we had down in the country, and being an unselfish community member, suddenly it was like, wow, I can just travel where I want. Spend my time as I like, go in retreat. Hey, great, at last. All those, me off alone in the forest fantasies. At last we could, right, now, I get to fulfill all my fantasies. My kind of, these are kind of monastic fantasies. Or at least the monastic fantasies that we can talk about in public. So, he'd heard from Ajahn Sumedho about when Ajahn Sumedho was a young monk, he'd gone off and he found this island in the Gulf of Thailand where there's this ruined Khmer temple on this island. There's just a small fishing village, and off in the interior of the island there's this old ruined temple, and in the ruined temple was this underground chamber which was totally silent, dry, perfectly quiet, peaceful. And so Ajahn Sumedho thought, that's where I'm going for my retreat. I'm going to find the island, I'm going to find the temple, I'm going to find the underground room, and I'm just going to sit a day, weeks. Get it all figured out. And to cut a long story short, he managed to find the island, got over there, went on alms round, met some of the villagers. They were very happy that he was there. He made it clear, even though his Thai was a bit rudimentary, he made it clear that he wanted to be alone. He didn't need a lot of disciples coming to help him every day. So, and he found the old temple and he found the underground chamber. Oh, great. This is perfect. But what he hadn't reckoned with was that Thailand was starting to get into the Christmas spirit, even though it's not a Christian country by any stretch of the imagination. In Thailand, they love festivals and they love reasons to celebrate, and so Christmas was becoming, even though the theology was a bit unclear, it was definitely, there was shopping and there was fun and there was Christmassy things. They were picking up various bits and pieces, he actually, on his way through Bangkok, he'd seen, this is absolutely true, he saw Father Christmas nailed to a cross on one department store. So they really were not quite clear on the concept, but this is absolutely true. He got to this island which is called Gosi Chung, and he had not even though the underground room was very quiet in terms of the local noise and animal sounds and so forth. He hadn't reckoned on amplified sound, and he hadn't reckoned on Christmas. And what happened was that across the bay, a beautiful still night, across the bay, at the local temple in town, they decided to have this Christmas festival. But the only Christmas music they had was a record, a 45 of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So here was Ajahn Sucitto, the lone yogi, sitting in his underground chamber, hell-bent on Nibbana, and what, as he's sitting there, and slowly across the waters, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose. So again, to cut a long story short, he first went, grumble, grumble, grumble. And then he thought, okay, well, it won't last long, it's a very short song, it'll be over in a minute. But of course, being the only record they had, as soon as it reached its end, paused for a moment, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, began again, and again, and again, over and over. And so his rage is mounting and mounting. Don't they realize there's people trying to meditate out here? How can they? This is incredibly bad karma, interrupting, etc., etc., etc. So then, and it went on for hours and hours, over and over and over again. He said, they can't want to hear it again. So he went through rage, exasperation, and just this sort of heartbreak, whimpering, pleading, all these different shades of emotional strain and colour, until finally, and so this is in glorious terms exactly what he would not have chosen. Finally, he just surrendered. Okay, well, I guess just for the rest of the night, this is going to be Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Okay, I give up. And then as he gave up, he just sat there, and he started, rather than listening to his own reactive mind, he started to listen to the words of the song. So, that's quite sweet, really. What a nice story. There he is, being rejected by, kind of looked down upon and laughed at by the other reindeer because of his funny nose. And what kind of a funny nose and funny teeth? People used to laugh at me as well, yeah. That's really horrible, isn't it? And then you have this tragedy of Father Christmas, and you think about all his presents, and you can't give out his presents because it's too foggy and you can't drive. All the kids are going to be disappointed, and that would be really bad. Well, if I was Father Christmas, that was happening to me, I'd feel really terrible too. And how wonderful! And then Rudolph is the one who can save the day. That's really great. Isn't that wonderful? And then not only can he save the day, then everyone's really appreciative. And then he finally is sitting there with tears running down his face. It's kind of bliss and rapture, this feeling, this incredible mudita for Rudolph and Father Christmas and all the kind of ugly, unloved, rejected beings of the world. And so then, he spent the rest of the night in this kind of rapturous state. He's still feeling mudita for Rudolph. So if you said, okay, Ajahn Suji, so how would you like to be in retreat with 3 hours of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, just for a kick-off, just for starters? I mean, you'd never choose it. But yet he was able to find this kind of beautiful, blissful experience through what in 1,000 years you would never have selected. So this is a kind of memorable example for us, so that to see that we can find gratitude if we have the right attitude. So I actually also, as I was contemplating this, it came to me that gratitude you can think of as generously receptive attitude, GR attitude. Generously receptive. Well, you can make your own up. So it came to my mind. Like that, if we're generously receptive and we really allow things into the heart, then we find this quality of brightness and this joyful relationship. We enjoy life, not because it's all delicious or what we like. We get what we want. Getting what we want makes us happy, but that giving, that generosity of heart, that openness of heart, unselfishness, gratitude is what brings joy. So we enjoy life by letting it be filled with joy in that way. The last thing that I'd say is we can easily think of gratitude in a dualistic way, like me being grateful for that thing. And as with many of the Buddha's teachings, it's a teaching or an expression which pertains to a certain level of our being. So it is in a way a dualistic concept. Me being grateful for that thing. But as with everything in the Buddha's teaching is pointing us towards, it's also something that we let go of, so that we don't want to, if we get stuck at me trying to be grateful for everything, then that's still a limitation. And we can find a place, the brightness that brings to the heart can support, and is a support for the insight whereby there's a letting go of self and other, where subject and object, self and other, is relinquished in that same quality of openness. It leads to that space where gratitude or forgiveness or even goodness doesn't belong. It's like there's no me here and that out there. And that quality of relinquishment is in a way the fulfillment of the gesture of gratitude. So that it's a pathway to that. Like I was using that because the Buddha's, when the Buddha was passing away, and he's lying on the beneath these twin sala trees in Kusinara, and the flowers are raining. The trees have burst forth into blossom out of season, and the flowers are raining down, and there's mandarava blossoms raining down from the heavens, and heavenly sandalwood powder, and it's all the celestial musicians are doing their thing, and all the heavens are resonating, and there's just gazillions of gods and devas and brahmas and nagas and people as far as the eye can see, or can't see. They can spread out all around the Buddha. And Ananda says, this is amazing, this is incredible, this is marvelous, Lord. And the heavens are resounding with the sounds of the Gandharvas, and the flowers are raining down. And never before has the Tathagata been so honoured, been so revered, so respected. And this is what I describe as amisa puja, like the gestures of reverence. external reverence or gestures of gratitude. And the Buddha says, even so, Ananda, never before has the Tathagata been so honored, so respected, so venerated as in this way at the Parinibbana. But if people really wanted to venerate and respect and honor the Tathagata in the very best way, then they would carry out his teaching. They would let go of greed, hatred, and delusion. This is the other piece of it, which is Patipati Puja, the puja of the practice. So that to fulfill gratitude, it's not just a matter of making gestures of gratitude or even having ideas of gratitude, but essentially it's that a complete relinquishing of self-concern, and then the heart abides in that relationship of delighting in enjoying in the presence of the Dhamma. So it's actually the Dhamma enjoying its own presence, where gratitude takes us to. So, this for consideration.